This particular story, I'm just gonna cover the first one. Just gonna cover the first one. This particular story has significance to me because when I was living in Richmond, Virginia, with my now ex-boyfriend, his father was dying from cancer, and on his deathbed, his evil wife, who was my ex-boyfriend's stepmother, made him sign away his body to science. And years later, we were still together for many years after his father passed away. And I would occasionally ask. I tried to delicately ask, "Do you know if your father's cremated remains were ever returned for burial?" um, It's such a messed up situation, but there are lots of evil people in this world, you guys.
Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, and today I'm going to share 3 stories that demonstrate that. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload 3 or 4 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please invite the like button to come over your house and play Mortal Kombat. And when they do, play real Mortal Kombat and uppercut them into the ceiling. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into.
By the way, like he doesn't he's got what he has 7.69 million followers, but he has also an entire community of people who do react videos, because these are all like ghost stories, like campfire stories, like the kind of shit that it's scary, and you just want to like hear it around like a campfire, because that's how a lot of people do, right? It happened. There's a huge fascination in this particular genre of storytelling, right?
Today's stories. In 2013, Jim Stauffer's mother finally passed away from Alzheimer's disease at the age of 74. Her doctors told Jim that her disease had mutated in a way they had not seen before, and they asked if he'd be willing to donate her body so they could study her brain. Jim felt like his mother would want him to say yes, and so he agreed. But for a variety of administrative reasons, the neurologists couldn't actually accept Jim's mother's body. At this point, Jim was really bought into the idea that his mother's brain was going to help other patients, and so while he couldn't donate her body to these neurologists, he could donate her body to the Biological Resource Center in Phoenix, Arizona. This center would take dead bodies and then extract parts of them for scientific research, and then would cremate the rest of them and return the ashes to the family. Jim gave his mother's body to the center, and when he filled out the paperwork, he indicated that her brain should be extracted for Alzheimer's research. After filling out the paperwork, Jim left, and 10 days later, he received a wooden box in the mail that contained his mother's ashes. There was no note attached to the box explaining exactly what was done to his mother's body, but Jim assumed they did what he asked. A year later, that Biological Resource Center was raided by the FBI after accusations they were selling these donated bodies for profit. During the FBI's investigation, they uncovered that yes, the center had been doing that and had sold at least 20 bodies to the US Army for various experiments. And one of the bodies that was sold was Jim's mother. She was sold for $5,893. The FBI told Jim she had not been used for Alzheimer's research. Instead, she had been strapped to this device that resembled a chair and then had a bomb detonated underneath her. The Army was trying to understand the effects on the human body when a vehicle is hit by an IED. The ashes Jim received in that wooden box he got in the mail were only from his mother's hand. The rest of her body was unrecoverable. Also, during this FBI investigation, they found inside the center there was a man's body on the wall with a female head sewed onto it.
Oh
it
my
appeared
God.
to be a trophy. Jim, along with 19 other families, sued the center, and finally Finally, in 2019, they were awarded $58 million in damages. The center no longer is in operation.
Wow. Okay, so I just wanted to cover that one story. The thing is, so we went through a very painful experience of watching my boyfriend's father die from, I don't know if it was pancreatic cancer or if it was like intestinal, because they had to do some exploratory work to try and figure out what was going on with him. But during the entire time that we went through this experience, his wife, this was his second wife, was basically torturing him. She had been screaming at him when he was on the phone with his son. Apparently, even, okay, so when they got married, when my ex-boyfriend was in high school. So she already was predisposed to favor her own children over him. And that was compounded by the fact that he was an adopted child. He was an adopted when he was a baby. So she used that against him. She weaponized that and made it into a situation where he's not a real child. He's not a blood relative. And this made it even more difficult for us to find out what ultimately happened to his father's body, because he was also a very angry person who was constantly mad at everybody, and it made it difficult for him to have family relations, to actually get the kind of information necessary to find out what ultimately happened. But as time went on, while he's fighting cancer, we, both of us, not just David, and not just me, but also my ex-boyfriend, were prevented from visiting him in the hospital. We had to go through a lot of steps to actually get the approval to actually enter the room and spend some time with him while he was undergoing medical treatment in the hospital. She ultimately overdosed him. By the way, I think I'm fairly safe in saying these things, because I learned recently that she passed away in 2018. So it's not like she's going to come after me at this point. But we were staying at her house one weekend in which she overdosed him, and then told us that he had a do not resuscitate order. And so therefore I was not allowed to call 911 because of this do not resuscitate order, which is bullshit. If somebody is trying to kill you, if somebody has given you too much medication and you're trying to survive something, of course you can call 911. That's not the same thing as being on life support and then your family pulling the plug, right? Like you're brain dead, or your organs will not function without, being on life support. Not the same thing at all. She OD'd him. And when I was told no, I could not call 911, and my ex-boyfriend came out and said that he talked to his dad. His dad was totally out of it, but he said, no, don't call 911. Because you know what? His dad was a submissive. And basically was just accepting the abuse that he was getting from this horrible woman, who, by the way, has been cited in an actual book from an employee of the Department of Education, who wrote a passage about her being one of the most horrible leaders she had ever met in the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. So basically what happened is we ended up staying there all day until they had to bring in home care. They had to set up home care so that there would be supervision, so there'd be somebody who was monitoring um, what kind of medicine he was taking and when he was taking it, and so on and so forth, because obviously she was either incompetent or malicious. One of the two things was happening. She ended up moving out for a month or two. I think it was a month or two. And I because I remember that we did a big Thanksgiving meal for him, and he couldn't eat much because whatever was going on affected his digestive. And but he did have one of my deviled eggs, and it was the first time he had ever had one before. And he did decide, like, he was an atheist, and he decided to kind of go back to his Greek Orthodox background from his family, because when you're approaching death, sometimes you are like, what if I'm wrong, like, rather be safe than sorry, because if I'm an atheist, I just believe it goes dark, right? But if I'm have some level of religion, and I accept God and Jesus into my heart or whatnot, then there's the potential that I might go to heaven, right? So you kind of like hedge your bets. Um, so we were going through all that, and he ended up passing away on New Year's Eve, the day that she put him in a convalescent home, basically. She was basically like, it's too much for me. I'm going to put you in this convalescent home. And on his deathbed, she made him sign his body over to science. Pay attention to the people around you. Do not accept abuse in your life. And don't accept the conditioning of your family members, your children. Don't accept the conditioning of your children, because there are a lot of abusive, angry people on this planet. Be aware of that, and don't allow the people that you love to be affected by that. That was an incredibly stressful time for us, but especially for me and my son, because this wasn't even my crazy family. This was somebody else's entire crazy family that we had to deal with on a weekly basis for 6 months while it was going on. And we had to watch the entire thing unfold, and it was one of the scariest things I've ever seen in my life.